Welcome to our program tonight. I'm Roger Kempler, board member of the Laguna Beach Historical Society, and it's really nice to have you all come here and get through the cold. And we're here tonight to learn more about and to celebrate a special Laguna institution, the Laguna Playhouse, and its 106 years of drama, which has been a special place for many here and many that aren't here, including my wife and me. We started ushering there in 2002 with Sally Struthers and Always Patsy Cline, which was a fun one if anyone got a chance to see that one. We have a distinguished panel here to talk about the longest continuous running theater west of the Mississippi. To my immediate right is Glenna Mathis. She will discuss the 1920 through 1960 period. She is a retired history professor with a PhD in American history from Stanford. Glenna first became involved with the Playhouse as a youth, set apprentice actor in various stage productions decades ago. To the right of Glenna is Jared Mathis. Jared is the great grandson of Nellie Gale Moulton, who largely funded and led the Playhouse move and opening in 1969 from its original location, where you now see a tribute at the still existing Pepper Tree, to its current spot as the Laguna Playhouse Moulton Theater. Jared will discuss this important woman and her key role then. He's also a current Playhouse board member and continues to be a key sponsor. To his right is Pat Kollenda. She served on the Laguna Playhouse board from 1985 to 1991, including as chair the last 2 years of her service, and helped hire, among others, two on our panel, Andy Barnicle, who's to her right, and Joe Lauderdale, two to her right, both of whom are responsible for many Playhouse main stage and youth productions during the 1990s and 2000s. She has appeared in Playhouse productions herself, including The Music Man, The Mystery of Edwin Drood and Barnum, and several others. She has also been involved with many other arts organizations in Laguna. Andy Barnicle, to her right, was the artistic director from 1991 to 2010, was involved in over 100 Playhouse shows, directed over 40, including Harvey, King of the Road, The Roger Miller Story, and The Rainmaker. He continues to not only direct but act in Playhouse productions. Andy was also involved in a series of Irish plays by Bernard Farrell that were favorites of my wife and me. To Andy's right is Joe Lauderdale. He joined the Playhouse to help develop the youth theater and strengthen the education program. In 1989, the American Alliance for Theater and Education, AATE, gave the Laguna Playhouse Youth Theater the honor of Outstanding Youth Theater of the Year. In 1990, Joe was promoted to Youth Theater Director, skillfully producing a four-play season while managing the repertory and conservatory, and a well-respected touring season. Two of the most successful mainstage shows of the time were produced and directed by Joe: Oliver in 1993 and The Secret Garden in 1995. In 2001, the AATE honored Joe by naming him the Youth Director of the Year. By the time Joe retired in 2005, after 17 years, he had earned the Laguna Playhouse Youth Theater a national reputation of excellence. To Joe's right is Lisa Hale. Lisa is the current chair of the Playhouse Board of Trustees, has been a key sponsor for several decades. She has also performed in multiple plays at the Playhouse, including starring as the Wicked Witch in the Youth Theater's production of Wizard of Oz. That must have been fun. And next to Lisa is Wally Ziegler, 36 years in counting with the Playhouse. Is currently, pretty amazing legacy. Currently, he's the Artistic and Audience Services Director. He has also served as in-house manager, casting director, company manager, prop master, let me take a deep breath, actor, usher, bartender, COVID compliance officer, and resident physician, including saving 2 lives there as a medic. Wally, a conscientious objector, was a Green Beret medic who served in a Vietnam high combat zone. Thank you, Wally, for your service. I also want to let you folks know about our next presentation on April 21, 2026. Rick Reef will talk about a really interesting character in Laguna and a man of national significance, Gabby Cravath. He was Major League Baseball's home run leader in the dead ball era before Babe Ruth, who later became Laguna's local magistrate judge over several decades. that included humorous dealings with local characters skirting the law, like Surfer Waterman, Peanuts Larson. Gabby was also involved heavily with the Water District. There's even a plaque for him there, and got very involved in real estate. I would also like to thank Adrian Henson, our professional videographer, preserving this for posterity, and who's also even written a few musicals himself. For those seeking more information about the Historical Society and Laguna history, please go to info@lagunabeachhistory.org. We also invite you to join the Laguna Beach Historical Society. You can do so by signing up tonight in the back. Your membership and your small donation helps fray the cost for these presentations, a Laguna Beach High School scholarship, local elementary school visits to the bungalow, and literally to keep our lights on. Feel free to drop by the bungalow to take in some local history, maybe even a tour with one of our docents. Open on Ocean Avenue between Wells Fargo and Whole Foods from 1 to 4 on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And for our valued members of the Historical Society, Equator Coffees, conveniently located next to the River Inn Theater, continues to offer 10% discount on your favorite beverages, not mugs or coffee beans. Thank you, Equator Coffees, for your partnership and providing a wonderful perk for members. Okay, now let's get started. Please silence your phones. Enjoy the presentation and the Q&A that will be led by board member Eric after. Join me in giving a big welcome to our distinguished panel.
Well, I'm going first. Is this on?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, I'm going to give a very concise overview of 40 years because I gave a much longer presentation in 2017. It's available on our website, and with all these people, I do not want to take a lot of time. In 1920, a group of community leaders, and the composition of these leaders, it's interesting. I don't know everybody who was there, but Elmer Jarvis of the lumber company was there. Frank Kuprian, distinguished local artist, was there. Isaac Prezee, the first artist to come in the late 19th century. So the Playhouse was clearly founded by the people who cared not only about theater, but about the arts generally, reflecting the nature of Laguna as an arts colony. Toward the end of the 1920s, a woman became involved, Adele Ritchie, also known as Mrs. Guy Bates Post, her husband's name, and it was not a good marriage apparently. It ended in divorce, and other people told me I had to bring this up. In 1930, Adele Ritchie was involved in a murder-suicide. She was apparently involved in a lesbian love triangle, and she killed her female companion and then committed suicide. And if you Google either Mrs. Guy Bates Post or Adele Ritchie, it was covered in the New York Times. So Laguna's sensational moment. I hope there haven't been too many like that. Quite his glory. So in the 20s, the building was built on Ocean Avenue across where Zinc is now. And then in the 30s, the city took it over because of delinquent taxes. The good news is, despite all the difficulties of the Great Depression, they kept on performing. And they performed all through the 30s. And then when World War II came, the building was taken over for USO. And if you go to my presentation from 2017, there's a wonderful picture of Lana Turner and John Garfield, who were here as part of that effort. So the Playhouse reopened as a community playhouse in the spring of 1946, and the first play they performed was You Can't Take It With You. And the reason I want to make a big emphasis, guess who was in the audience? Moi! My parents and I moved here from Sacramento. My dad had been, during the war, he had filled in for editor of the Sacramento Union. He came down to edit the South Coast News, as it then was. And I had seen one other play, Charlie's Aunt in Sacramento, which is hilarious. And I was 7, but I fell in love. Oh, you can't take it with you. It was so funny. And it was just magical. And to the best of my knowledge, I don't think our family ever missed a performance. My dad was cast almost immediately in The Male Animal, which is a play by Thurber. And he played a college professor. And he was having trouble learning his lines. I rehearsed with him. 7-year-old little Glenna sat in the front row of every performance in case he stumbled. But I'm happy to say I did not need to prompt him. But from the get-go, we were involved. I don't think my father was in any more productions. I was in youth theater in high school. We moved away for a couple of years and then we moved back for high school. And I was in The Clown Who Ran Away, children's theater. In 1951, I was Glorious Gloria, the flirting doll. Typecast, no doubt. And then I was an apprentice in the professional summer stock theater, which was, I was 14, and I was way too young to be involved, but our job, it was, it was repertory, it was a different play every week, and so the apprentices scraped the flats so that they could be painted and reused. So I guess they must have had 2 sets of flats, and one was being used and the other was being prepared. And then I worked sound backstage on Stalag 17. I did all kinds. But the main thing I want to leave with you, and I remember so many plays we saw. Detective Story, The Mad Woman of Chaillot, just a huge range. It was such a community undertaking. There were frequent potlucks. How many of you know who Vera Newcomb was? Any of you know who? She was this wonderful local character who was, she would wear kind of Victorian era clothes, and she had a gray pompadour, and she would vamp the audience. And so we would have these, the Playhouse had these potlucks, and I don't know whether it was monthly or, I tried to find in the records and I couldn't. I didn't spend that much time. But, I remember long tables like this, and probably 30 or 40 people, or maybe 50, and potluck, and then Vera Newcomb would do an English, I didn't know at the time, but I think it was an English music hall number, and she would vamp the audience with her pompadour. And as I said in 2017, I'll say the same thing, my dad got another job, we moved away when I graduated from high school. It took me 49 years to figure out how to come back. But I wanted to live in a place that had Vera Newcombs, not to mention Eilers. It was so exhilarating. There was so much, I use the word yeasty, so much yeasty cultural creativity. It was magical. Now, there were problems. I don't want to say there were no problems. But what I remember was just the exhilaration of the new productions and all the talent. In my longer presentation, I talk about the families that were particularly involved. And I don't want to take any more time, so with that, you're on.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Jared Mathis, and I have no business being up here with all these people who've spent so many decades loving the Playhouse. I've been involved only 13 years on the board, and it's been a pleasure being involved with such a beautiful lady, the Laguna Playhouse, right? And it also meant a lot to me, too, to get involved because of my great-grandmother's involvement in making the Playhouse. And one time was called Laguna Molten Playhouse. Pretty clumsy, really, but now just Laguna Playhouse with Molten Theater. And some things are just meant to be. And we found her manuscript. She wrote her life story and we found it 2 years ago on a roll top desk, and we just published it. So I was going to read a couple of things from this book that I think are poignant for this moment. So as I said, some things are meant to be. Nellie Gail Moulton started her life in a very theatrical way, and you'll hear why. She said, "I was born in Irving, Kansas in a 2-story house. At the age of 7 months, we had a terrible cyclone. Mother was holding me in front of our living room window, watching the cyclone approach. Then it hit the house and broke the large window we were standing in front of. The force picked up Mother and I and carried us through the room into the bedroom and set us on the bed unharmed. This was my first flight." She documented all the flights in her life. And that was, legend has it, the inspiration for The Wizard of Oz. If you believe it, that's great. If it's legend, that's great too. But it's a fun story. And, it was very much part of her personality to be involved in the arts and be involved in education. She was a teacher and a principal in that day and up in what became Seattle. And when she first came to Southern California to marry my great-grandfather, who was, by the way, a fair amount older than her, about 22 years older, she hated it. She looked at all the rolling hills out by El Toro and just thought it to be very plain. And it wasn't until she got in that horse and buggy and came down Laguna Way where she really found her people. And it was a lot of those same people that they helped fund and had tea parties and raised money for all the different organizations in town, whether that was keeping the doors open for Laguna Art Museum or the Laguna Art Association at the time, Laguna College of Art and Design, the art school before. It was really where they made a big difference. And it wasn't just her, it was a lot of people, a lot of the names that we already mentioned, that really rallied around this town as the art colony that it became. So to give an idea of the time in her life when she actually helped build the Playhouse as we currently know it, that was in the 60s. And her husband died in 1938. She lived all the way until 1972, to the age of 93. And so in the 60s, their backyard, Moulton Ranch, which ran from Irvine to San Juan Capistrano and included Top of the World and Moulton Meadows Park and that area up there, it was selling off in pieces as time went on. And it was in those moments when she would be able to help fund the things that she really cared about. In 1967 or so, they started this idea of building a new playhouse. And she brought in her friend, William Pereira. Anybody recognize that name, William Pereira? Okay. So he was the architect of the day, world-renowned architect. And to give you an idea, in 1959, he was designing, at LAX, that kind of space-age looking building right by the international terminal. Kind of goes up like that. That was his design, and that was about 1959. In 1965, he was opening up UCI as he had designed that campus, at least that phase of it at that point. And then he actually created a whole plan that we found not long ago about that he created if we had actually held on to the ranch and developed it ourselves, which we weren't. We were ranchers. We didn't want to do that to the land. In any case, in 1967 or so, he started designing the Laguna Playhouse. And then in 1968, he started designing the Transamerica building in San Francisco. And then in 1972, he designed the ziggurat in Laguna Niguel, La Felicia, that brutalist kind of pyramid-looking thing, right? You either love it or you hate it. That was high caliber. And obviously, he knew Mrs. Irvine. He knew Nellie Gail with his work at UCI and what he had done with the ranch. So he was the perfect choice to come in and design, at that moment in time, Laguna Playhouse. And Nellie Gail was always very involved. There's that really kind of fun picture that's up in the Playhouse of her kind of pointing up at the framed building, and Pereira's the one standing right next to her as the architect. And so it wasn't just the Playhouse that she loved, but it was all the art institutions in Laguna Beach that she tried to have an impact on, and got the phone call when times were tough, and and stepped up. And I think that is really the spirit, not just of her, but of Laguna Beach in general. And the people of that time that were builders of these great institutions that have maintained. There's another passage from this book that I'd like to read you. And again, she wrote this book when she was 90, or the manuscript when she was 90, which was right as the Playhouse was being built. So that's kind of the frame of mind she was in at the time. And she said, "In the legacy left to me in the name of my husband, in memory of his humanitarianism, I have endeavored in my donations to community projects to help, to hopefully encourage the spirit of creativeness and enjoyment of the arts, for there is one thing I believe will never fade into oblivion: beauty in literature, painting, music, the drama, no matter how some, for whatever motive, will agitate to bring true talent to ridicule. Those who appreciate and know its worth will never let it die." So that's a window into her thought process. And, I think what was really common with her, and I think with a lot of folks in Laguna, they would have these challenge gifts. Okay? Hey, I'll give you $100,000, but you got to go out and raise $100,000 too. And they built a heck of a lot of good things doing that, working together. So I think that's the legacy that she helped leave behind and what we carry on with the Playhouse still today.
Great.
I feel positively dull.
You have, you doll.
It brought to mind, I'm currently an arts commissioner, and in Laguna Beach, the City of Arts, we have 32 nonprofit arts groups in a city of 22,000. This is amazing. The thing about the Playhouse is it incorporates all the arts. Set design, performance, music, all of it is incorporated at the Playhouse. And that is a gift to every one of us and to the community. Now, going back to my time, it was a community theater, which I absolutely loved, because it meant I, as an amateur, could perform. I can't perform on that stage today. Just pissy. But as a community theater, we operated in the black. We had a staff of maybe 7 people full-time. That was it. And a board of 9, and the board was composed of 3 worker bees, 3 knowledgeable theater people, and 3 money people, though they weren't called money people. And we had a play reading committee that read the plays or the musicals, and the theater at that time could do. I was in The Music Man, a very large musical. They rented a trailer in the parking lot to put all the children in. Thank you, God. And we did, my most favorite, we did Barnum, and I played the world's oldest woman. I actually could do that today.
You weren't then?
Oh boy. And you see, I've had all these joint replacements, so I'm proud to say I hired this one, and that one, and Rick Stein. And it was after I went off the board that Rick took it to an equity theater. And I still miss the fact, I'm being very honest here, of a community theater where you could do large-scale productions because everybody was free, except the technical staff. And Dee is there and knows that the pageant would not be possible without 500 volunteers. So it's very difficult to operate a community theater. I just have to tell you one fun story. I used to have periodically a board meeting at our home, and we had, the staff thought they all needed a raise, and so they picketed my house. It was very exciting. And then were you there when Toady Field's daughter was there?
Yes. I I was.
Mm-hmm. So Tody Field's daughter, a very cute little gal, and she was hired as a general manager, and her husband was running the youth theater at the time. It was before Joe. And she and Doug Rowell, the current artistic director, who was there for, I think, 20 years. And Doug...
More.
How more?
More.
More. How much?
More than 20.
Okay, more than 20. I just love it when I'm caught up in statistics. They didn't get along, and it got very exciting. So you heard a lot of screaming and yelling, and I just loved being there when that happened. It's just so fun. We also had a membership. People joined the Playhouse. They paid a membership fee, and they were entitled to first choice of the seats. And then we had a membership cocktail party, and they voted on the board. So there was a lot of community involvement at that time. And I feel pretty strongly that we need to get our current people that live in Laguna going to the Playhouse and supporting our local art institutions. It's just a key. And I won't put all of you to shame and ask how many have been to the Playhouse or how many productions, because I think statistically it's less than 20% of our population. So that would be my push, because wonderful things have happened at that Playhouse. I mean, we did a one-woman show. Oh God, please tell me her. Julie Harris. 2 nights of Julie Harris. Theater was sold out. It was memorable. Whole run. Was it a whole run? Well, that's my memory. I am the world's oldest woman. I remember these wonderful, wonderful times where such special, and we had such talent, and I know there is still such talent, but the productions were fabulous. They were just fabulous, and they still are, and we just need to be there. And currently, I don't know if all of you are aware, but I just came from my Arts Commission meeting. So I really want to share when I mentioned the 32 nonprofit arts groups. So there is a kind of a little marriage of a 3-part collaboration, Jaws month. So the Rivian is doing the Jaws, the shark movie. The theater is doing The Shark is Broken at the Playhouse, which I know is fabulous. And the Loca Arts Education is having an art talk with Bill Walden, who made the shark, I guess, and it didn't work, or some horrible thing like that. But that's a collaboration of 3 nonprofit groups over one thing. And this is what the Arts Alliance is about in Laguna, is collaboration, is engaging the museum and the college and all of these wonderful, all 3 festivals to interact with each other and support each other. And that's why I'm making this plea, because I think that's what we have to do to keep our institutions viable and productive and giving us the gifts that they give us every day. Every day.
Thank you.
I think that the statistics are in our favor, quite frankly. If there were 2,000 or 3,000 subscribers in a town of 22,000, if you had that kind of percentage across the county, there would be a line out the Canyon Road every single day. So, I think Laguna does its good bit to support the theater. I mean, not everybody's a theater goer. Excuse me. I have a funny story I want to start with, and then, because the large number of community participants we have now are the ushers who come in every year at the beginning of each season. They have a big meeting, they fill up the theater, and they make their assignments for the whole season, who's going to be the usher on this Thursday in March and this Friday in November. And they have cookies and coffee and fruit bowls and things. And we had a house manager at the time who was petrified of public speaking. But he was in charge of this thing. He had to stand up there and introduce everybody and explain what was going on and what the rules were going to be. And he came to me because I'd been a public speaking professor at the university, and he came to me and he said, "Andy, you gotta help me. I gotta make this speech, in front of the ushers, and there's 300 of them. What do I do?" And I said, "Lee, you're a smart kid. Just trust yourself, know what you're gonna say, bone up on the material so you're not gonna suddenly find yourself guessing as to what you're talking about, and just go out there with 5 points and make yourself clear." So he walked down the aisle, went up on the stage, took a hold of the microphone, looked out over this field of Leisure World citizens, and he said, "It's a pleasure to see so many old faces." I almost fell out of my chair. I felt like the worst speech teacher in the world that night. I came to the Laguna Playhouse in 1991. I'd been a professor, head of the theater department at United States International University in San Diego, where I taught theater history as well as acting and directing. And the school had gone bankrupt, and so there was a diaspora of their faculty members, and I got lucky. I didn't miss a month. But I did, as Pat was nipping on, I kind of walked into the middle of a revolution. Doug Rao, who was the late Doug Rao, was the artistic director as well as the producing director, or whatever they called him at the time. And eventually the board didn't like that arrangement, and so they hired Rick Stein, who was at the time at the Grove Shakespeare Festival, and created the new title of executive director, which I don't think Doug really appreciated much. And Rick and Doug then thereby didn't get along immediately. By the time I got there, it was a year later, and Doug had resigned and decided he was going to join the board, which he did. I kind of was looking around going, I don't know any of these people, and I really don't know much about Laguna. I'm just a theater guy, I'm going to do my best here. And so, at that point in time, and it had been going on for years, the directors were being paid, the designers were being paid, the staff at the Playhouse, full-time staff was obviously being paid. The only people that weren't being paid were the actors, except that wasn't entirely true. They were using union actors, usually one or two in each play, to play important parts. They're being paid. And so, after doing a little bit of investigation, I also found out that there was a small army of regular actors there that were also being paid, that weren't in the unions. They weren't volunteering their services. They would do a play if they got paid $1,000 for the month run. And so that was on record. And when I saw that, I said, this place, we had, at that time, I think we had 8,000 or 9,000 subscribers. And the budget was over $1 million. And I thought to myself, we are so perfectly poised to take that one last step to becoming a professional theater. And it doesn't mean you have to push everybody that was there before out. There's always going to be something for volunteers to do. But once we started doing, we moved to 2 or 3 equity guest artists, and then eventually Actors Equity says you can't. We were doing, I think it was Strange Snow, which I also acted in, where we had 3 union actors and a union stage manager, and the union, which is Actors Equity Association, says you can't do that. You can't have 4 guest artists in a production. You need to get yourselves a contract, and we will help you do that. It'll take years. They put us on the lowest tier of a union contract. And they said, as you build your budgets and as you build your reputation and everything, we'll move you up the ladder until eventually we got to LORT B. And I don't know if you know what LORT means, because nobody does. It's a very odd, awkward sounding anagram for the League of Resident Theaters. And it's theaters all across the country. I think there's about 90 of us that all belong to this association, and we meet regularly for annual conferences and decide, and we exist, LORT exists as a body that will stand opposed to the producers when it comes time to negotiate a new 5-year contract, which is how they operate. And that 5-year contract will talk about salaries, talk about housing, and talk about safety measures, and talk about everything that any other union does for its crowd. There was a famous old story at a LORC conference many, many years ago where when they were first trying to come up with a name, somebody suggested they call it the Federation of American Regional Theaters, but that anagram wasn't going to go over. That's a true story. That's a true story. Edgar Rosenblum is who it was. So when we started using union actors and having to pay them and house them, by nature the size of the casts got smaller, unless we could fill it out with lots of non-union people. But even then, Orange County was growing, South Orange County was growing so rapidly, commuting was very, very difficult. The distance between Whittier and Laguna tripled, pretty much, in terms of how long it would take you to drive there to go to a 7 o'clock rehearsal at night, or a 7:30 call for a performance. It was just getting difficult, and the community theater in a movement in America was diminishing all across the country. There's only a few of them left that have large budgets, like the one in Nebraska, I think it is, and Omaha, yeah. But for the most part, they've fallen off the earth. There's a few small ones, but the days of people working on the evenings and on Saturdays for 4 or 5 weeks, then doing a couple of weekends worth of shows, pretty much over in the American theater. And so I felt it was inevitable that we move into the professional realm. It was going to happen to us one way or another, whether I was there or not. And audiences were getting bigger. There were now 10,000 subscribers. The budget was now $4 million. And so it was a matter of sort of osmosis. It's just a slow growth. Nobody really getting behind and saying, we're going to do this now. And there was resistance, and I accept that from Pat and others. There was resistance, but as I said, for me, all I cared about was what can we do, how can we use our resources to make the place as good as they can be? I don't care where the people live. I don't care whether they want to be amateurs or professionals, whatever. How can we use our resources to make the best possible place for our audience? And that was my philosophy. I did produce, I think, 140 plays in my 19 years. I know I directed 40 of them. And by the time we were at our peak, it was probably right before 2008 when the financial meltdown happened, and we had to change some of our, they moved the goalposts on us, let's put it that way, financially. We were regularly using well-known actors, Sally Struthers, who's already been mentioned here, and Julie Harris has already been mentioned here. That was happening on a regular basis. Julie Harris, by the way, after she did the Bella Bainhurst at Laguna for a month, she toured the country in a bus and truck tour, which is playing mid-sized theaters across the country, 22 cities, I believe. And the Laguna Playhouse program was in every one of those performances in every one of those cities. The same thing happened later with Copenhagen. We put together the first production outside of Broadway of the play Copenhagen by Michael Frayn. We rehearsed it, mounted it in Laguna for a month, and then they toured another 24 cities in the bus and truck. So our name was getting out there. We were getting pretty well known, and actors were starting to peek over the fence at us. You know, hey, can I work down there? I never would have thought it. And I didn't think it was a big deal, but now I think you guys are doing great work. At one point in time, I think we had 8 out of 9 productions were Critics' Choices in the LA Times. And it was we had momentum, we were moving very well, and our audiences were digging it. And then the financial crash happened, and everybody went crazy. But that's sort of a brief history from my perspective of what went on. I left when, after that financial crash, they changed a lot of the ways that the plays were going to be picked, and I didn't like them, those ways, and I didn't want to fight with them. But I didn't want to do what they wanted me to either. So I just sort of politely said, I'm going to leave. And then a number of different things have happened since then that I can't speak to, but Wally probably can. So, there you go.
Hey, Wally. So I was brought into the Playhouse in 1988 which no one has mentioned, when the Playhouse was actually in discussions to buy what is now Hagen Place.
Across the street?
Across the street. And that was going to be a second theater. And the goal was to expand the youth theater programming from what it was. And I even saw the plans and gave them suggestions, because some of them sucked. And we worked on it, and then they found a toxic spill underneath it. And once they cleaned that up, they added that to the price, and the Playhouse said, no, thank you. So that's why I was brought on. I was hired by Toady Field's daughter. Her name was Jody Davidson. Of course, Pat was president. Her name was Jody Davidson at the time, and I had to change my name when I joined. I had to change it to Joe because my name was Jody. And she forced me to change my name. She was not a nice lady. But she was very good to me in so many ways. But yes, I changed it, and I never changed it back after she left, which I wish I had have. But, so I was hired in 1988 to expand the youth theater program. I did work with Scott Davidson for 2 years in the youth theater. And when Scott left, which was the year that Rick was hired, which was 1991. No, 90, you were 91. 1990. I just was there and had to take over. And I've trained for it. I've been in graduate school. I came there directly from graduate school at the age of 25. I actually like to think that I grew up there. Some of the kids that I started working with were in their teenagers, and now some of them call me when they turn 40, 50, etc. Which is very nice of them. Okay, all right. Yeah, okay. So in the very first show I directed at the Playhouse, I had a young man. It was called Wally and the Hairy Man, and I had a young man named Peter Balmaceda. Peter was lovely. He did several shows. He was in our program for 2 or 3 years, and then he went off to OSHA. And that young man changed his name, because that was the American version of his name, and his name is Pedro Pascal. So there used to be a big photo of Peter in the dressing rooms, or on the hallway by the dressing rooms. I wish I still had it, because it was mine, but that's okay. But I took over, and when I took over the Playhouse, we had about 600 subscribers, between 3 and 6, it varied. And within 1 year of me being in charge, we had over 3,000. And yeah. And we stayed between 3,000 and 4,000 my entire 17 years while I was there. And one of the reasons is because my philosophy was different than my predecessor, and there's nothing wrong with what my predecessor was doing, absolutely not. But my philosophy was different. Everything we did was literature-based. And so kids wanted to see their books come to life. And having gone through a Theater for Youth program in graduate school, I knew that. And so we went from doing 6 performances to 10 in our season. I mean, we did 4 shows, fully produced, designed by professionals, and on the big stage with giant sets often, and costumes by amazing designers, and the full lighting. And we ended up doing 10 performances in our season, plus school matinees, which added 2 or 3 performances to that run. So that was, 12, 13 performances of 4 shows a season. We always cast adults in adult roles. Lisa Hale was in many, many of my shows at the Playhouse. I never cast children as adults, unless if they were going to be playing a rabbit or a mouse. You know, something like that. You can have a child play an adult mouse. It's perfectly fine. So that was part of the way I was trained, and so that's the way I worked. But it was also the way my predecessor worked, which is how I met Lisa Hale, because she was one of the first persons I met when I came to the Playhouse. I even met Lisa before I met you, Pat. I know, go figure. And so for 10 years, I worked all by myself. That was running a full conservatory program. Those were kids who were at the Playhouse once a week. They studied first started out an hour and a half, went to 2 hours, and they received the program for free. And part of the deal was that those kids would then work on our productions. Not just being in them, but working backstage. But they were also trained by the professional staff to stage manage, to run light board, to run soundboard, to learn how to use body mics. Okay, I have a very fun story about body mics. We were doing Rumpelstiltskin, and it was not a musical, but the director, I did not direct that one, wanted Rumpelstiltskin in a body mic. And there was a 12-year-old girl running sound. Her name was Sabrina Harper. She's now been on Broadway recently, or fairly recently, and has been back here. She was 12-year-old running sound, and I was in the office downstairs because we really only had one office downstairs. And that was about it for all of us. And I'm with some parents, and she comes running in screaming, and she shouts, "Joe, Rufino's condom broke and I can't find the new ones." And I said, "It's on the prop shelf, second floor, all the way to the right." And I turn and I look at the parents, and they're quizzical. And I said, "Oh, we have to use condoms on the mic packs to prevent them from sweat." And they all went, "Oh, okay." So these kids learned a lot. And many of them actually, well, I didn't actually mean that the way it sounded. I didn't actually mean that the way it sounded. I meant about technical theater.
Hey Joe, what is this thing anyway?
Yeah, she knew what it was. She had liberal parents. So, as a matter of fact, her mother was also a costume designer there, and continues to design costumes. So some of those kids, like we had a teenager in high school, because of his knowledge of technical theater, went on to design a game for Blizzard while he was still in high school. Wow. And the Playhouse would often hire our kids to hang lights. Some of them worked in the box office because they also worked in the box office. They also, there was a house manager for each show, and they scheduled all the ushers. Who also worked with Wally and Lee to help. So the kids had a really vast amount of training, but it was just me for 10 years. And I also didn't mention that during that time, I also developed a touring program. We received a grant from a foundation I can't remember the name of anymore, to take a show into Anaheim Public Schools. Yes, it was called Theater Reach, but I can't remember the name of who donated the original money. So I knew, and when I helped Rick Stein, our executive director, put it together, I said, this has got to be curriculum-based. So we took a show into Anaheim, and then that suddenly grew to Anaheim. And then it was growing to all over Orange County. So I would sit with my Thomas guide, and I would plot out their directions for each school, because they usually went to 2 a day for about 3 to 4 months. So I spent hours and hours, and I was so happy to do that.
You're a professional actor, right?
What?
Professional actor.
Not at that point. When we started out, we didn't start with professional actors, although they were very good. You were in one. Lisa was actually in one of them. And some of our kids were in them after they graduated. But the program had really gotten, the whole youth theater program had grown so much, I couldn't control it anymore. I just couldn't do everything. So we hired Donna and Glenna to come on as education director, and I said, here, you take all the education stuff. And she did, and I said, one of our goals eventually is to have this touring program be under a TYA contractor, which is Theater for Young Audiences in Actors Equity. It took quite a few years to do that, but we finally did it. And the show I had chosen for when she came in was called By the Great Horn Spoon, which every fifth grader in California reads. And I'd gotten permission directly from the author of the book to do it. But I turned it over to her, and she took it and ran with it. And she really developed that program a lot. And it was eventually just touring everywhere, all over Orange County.
50.
What?
50 performances.
50 performances, yeah, in the spring. So I was very proud of all the work that we had done, and I was very proud of the kids. I have other kids who have gone on. One kid created a couple of television shows, directed in London on the stage, is working with Pat Benatar on a jukebox musical. We've had kids on Broadway. A kid had his own television show called New Amsterdam, if you remember that. So I'm very, we also have a lot of lawyers. And many of them have said their theater training was the best training they ever had to go into a courtroom. Because one of the things that working with theater does is it teaches you how to communicate and how to work as a group, as an ensemble. But by 2005, I was really tired. And I just decided I really needed a break. So I decided to leave at that point. But I knew I left it in great hands with Donna. So the youth theater was an amazing. When I left in 2005, going back to your numbers, the youth theater productions had a budget of $1 million. Just the productions. That's not counting all of the education stuff. So I feel like I was very, very lucky to have been at the Laguna Playhouse in those years and to feel so incredibly supported by Rick Stein and Andy Barnicle, which is really nice because really they just left me alone. And, you know, Andy especially said, you know what you're doing. I don't know anything about youth theater. You do your thing. And that's what I did. And
He was a great boss.
He was.
Yes, you were.
Yeah, just leave me alone.
Okay.
Yeah, you just leave me alone. I'll get it done. I made mistakes, but we all do. And I was lucky. I was nationally known. The youth theater was considered one of the best of its kind in the country. I did win those awards, which was very wonderful and recognized by my peers. And so I was lucky and blessed and fortunate and all of those wonderful words. Plus I grew up there. I was only 25. I feel like I grew up at the Playhouse. Randy wants to say.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Twice, once with Oliver and once with The Secret Garden, we were able to combine our youth theater with professional actors for a main stage scheduled production. So therefore we could have 40 people on the stage. That is almost impossible otherwise, but we had all the kids in the youth theater playing all the urchins in Oliver and all the people in The Secret Garden. And I think that was important to mention. And the other thing is, around 2008, we did a retreat, and we kind of looked at the whole organization to see what was going on. And the youth theater, while it had $1 million budget, was not selling $1 million worth of tickets, and it was not attracting $1 million worth of grants. So it was losing money. And in this retreat, somebody took a whole audit of the youth theater, came back, because some of our board members thought, we're losing money, we've got to get rid of this thing. For them, dollars and cents is, the only thing. And the person who came back, who'd done all this research on the youth theater, specifically said, if you get rid of this program, you're crazy. This is the best program you've got. This is the only youth theater like it in the country. that does the things that you guys are doing. It's worth losing money to keep this program. And so we figured out a way, and I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Andy, because I wasn't there in 2008, but I did actually know that. Yeah, Oliver and Secret Garden were really fantastic shows. That had a run of 8 shows a week for 6 weeks.
Both of which he directed.
Both of which I did direct. And also Secret Garden was the first show under the Lord contract, which Lisa Hale was also in. She stepped in at the last minute for an injured actor. Yeah, so that was from the first show under the Lord D, I think it
They're
was.
both very successful productions.
They were very successful. And I was very lucky with those 2 shows that Andy trusted me to take those on. So the Playhouse holds a very special place in my heart because it was my first job out of graduate school and a place where I could spread my wings and learn myself along with the kids that I taught.
Joe, you're welcome for all those youth theater awards.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
Gosh darn, somebody had to do the work, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, who here remembers quilters? Anybody see quilters at the Playhouse a long time ago? Really? Sold out?
Auditioned for
Right,
it.
yep. So, I came up here from San Diego to attend the theater program at UC Irvine. And the first show that I tried out for was quilters. And the youth theater was also auditioning for Winnie the Pooh. So I thought, well, gosh darn it, I'll just audition for both of them, you know? So I did. And Scott Davidson was running it and said, please come to my callbacks. I thought, okay, this is great. So I'm on a roll. So I went and auditioned for quilters, and Joan McGillis, Kelly McGillis's mom, was directing, and she said, please, I want you to come to my callback. And I thought, oh, now what am I gonna do? So I said, well, you know, Joan, I've already committed to the callbacks for Winnie the Pooh. And she looked at me like I had 3 heads, which I did, and said, but I would really, really like you to come to my callback. And I said, well, you know, thanks, okay. And I went to the Winnie the Pooh callbacks. And that was pretty much how my life has gone. I should have gone to quilters, and I didn't. And then I ended
But you're an
up-
amazing Kanga.
Right, I was a wonderful Kanga, so there's that. So getting involved with the youth theater meant I got involved with Jody and Scott Davidson, and then Jody hired me to work in the box office, and she hired me to do season tickets, and that's where I met Joe when he got hired, and I met Andy, Rick Stein. Kat was the first one of you guys. Wally, I
No,
don't
I
know.
was first.
Were
I
you
came
over
before
Kat?
Kat.
Really?
I came before Kat.
Okay, and I'm not sure who was there before, if you were there first, or I was there first, I don't
You were there
remember.
first, that was 2 years after you.
I was 12 at the time, clearly,
Exactly.
right, exactly,
You were a teenager.
right. So I remember when Pat was running the board, and I was working in the box office, and I would pretend to be wallpaper when she walked in, because she was on a roll and large and in charge. And great. I think you and I are one of the very few female chairs at the Playhouse. I think so.
Yes,
Were there any
absolutely.
others that you guys remember?
Not while I was there.
I just had to throw one thing in.
Mhm.
I forgot. So when I was on the board, I don't need the mic. When I was on the board, they didn't have term limits. And we had a member of the board that had been there since the dawn of time. And he was very controlling. So I put in term limits. You could only serve 2 3-year terms, and then you had to be off a year, and then you could
serve again, right? So I thought I was so clever because we got rid of it. And then I got to be, you know, chair of the board. But then I had to go off after 2 terms. And so I really screwed myself because I loved being on that board. It was wonderful, and it was creative, and dealing with these people was a gift.
So, anyway, long story short, did a lot of work on the main stage, Secret Garden, working Love Lost What I Wore, too many youth theater productions to even discuss.
She played a computer in one of my shows and I wouldn't let her blink.
Yes, yeah, when we took that show on the road to Vegas, the children were so excited. So stayed around the Playhouse for a while, moved on to some civic light opera work, and came back to join the board. And that was 2008, I think, right before, Andy was still here. I've really enjoyed being on the board. It's an exceptional experience, and knowing more about the theater than my average board members, probably the same for Pat, has really helped the board. It's difficult to have financial stewardship of something when you don't really know how it operates or how it should operate correctly. And to be able to have board members understand that it is about the work, and yes, it's a nonprofit, but you gotta keep the lights on and pay the bills, and it's really difficult to balance that. So it's always been a mission for me to keep the board informed and inspired about the work and how important it is, and to support the staff and not run the show. You hire professionals to let them be the professionals. It's your job to help them in any way you can, but not to tell them how to do their job. So my experience on the board, and especially being the chair for a few years now, I was chair first with Jared. We chaired jointly for a couple of years, and that was a great experience also. So anyway, it's my great honor in life. My kids have been a part of the Playhouse. These guys are like family. That's what theater does. It brings people together in its best ways. So, all right.
I did one, actually, I did one other thing. Of course I did. No. Because Pat was on the board and president at the time, but there's someone else I would like to point out, which is Heidi Miller, sitting right there. Heidi was also on the board when I was hired at the Playhouse.
Yeah.
And so Heidi and I have known each other for a very long time, which is wonderful because I adore her and I adore Pat. And I was also lucky because I got to work with Doug Rao too. I was in between from both regimes, I guess, if you want to call it.
That's what I call it.
Yeah, and so I was very lucky that way that I got to work both ends, so to speak.
All right, Wally, you're up.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank Roger Kempler for arranging this panel and this meeting, and I'm honored. It's honored to me to be included with all of these illustrious people. I've been through 5 regimes. That's what I call them, 5 regimes, and I've known Joe and Lisa the longest, even longer than Andy Barnicle. I started volunteering in 1989. I used to tell people the last century, but it's the last millennium even. And it's my privilege to have worked with every single one of these people except for Glenna. I've listened to all of their speeches and their works and what they've done and their efforts of what they did about in all the productions and everything. I've seen over 400 productions in my 36 years here, but all of my work has kind of been behind the scenes. No pun intended there. But all my work, I actually started going to the Playhouse as a patron back in the 60s. At Pasadena High School, we came down, we did the show The Fantastics, and we came down here to the Playhouse to watch the Fantastic production. And my grandparents had a trailer at Treasure Island before the montage was there. And so I came down here all through my high school days, and I saw many of the shows that they put on. I was an actor in junior high, high school, and Washington State University. And And then my brother opened a restaurant, well, the Orange Inn. He opened the Orange Inn on the highway with John Bedrero. And then when Irvine's company sold off the cattle field and the horse stables and everything, they relocated us into Laguna. The Orange Inn is still going strong. Matter of fact, we get a lot of our banana bread brownies and cookies from the Orange Inn. And John Bedrero and his son, I've known all their lives. Then in the late '60s, I got drafted and I went to Vietnam, like Roger told you, and I went through Green Beret training. I was a conscientious objector, but Special Forces still kept me. They said that if I had to be trained in all of the weaponry, which I was. I was an expert with an M14 and M16, 45s and 50 millimeters I shot, and I was sharpshooter with a lot of the weapons and all the training, the hand-to-hand combat training that we had, and the medical training that we had. Medical training was the regular Army medic training was 6 weeks. It was more like a first aid class, or how to put somebody on a litter, how to stop the bleeding. But the Special Forces training was 1.5 years, and it was just like medical school, which later I went to. And so in 1969 and 70, I was in Vietnam. When I came back, I went to Laguna, where my brother Carl, 3 years younger than I, he was working at the. They were all living in South Laguna. An interesting thing, when I was in Vietnam, Carl sent me a picture of he and his 4 or 5 of his friends in a convertible car, and they had signs about end the war, peace, not make peace, make not love, all kinds of, he was in part of all kinds of protests. And he sent me this one picture, and I put it up on my hooch. So everybody in my platoon that would come in and see that, they go, "Who's that?" And I go, "That's my brother and his friends." And they go, "Right on, get us out of here." So that was kind of an interesting little thing. During the 70s, I worked at his restaurant, and I also attended some of the plays as a patron. And then my friend Tommy and I, we graduated in 1966, and we wanted to go to the Pasadena Playhouse and try to join the Pasadena Playhouse, but they were in bankruptcy. So we came down to Laguna, and it was, like I said, 1967, I believe, and we wanted to audition to some of the plays and everything, but something happened that prevented us from doing that. When I was at the Playhouse during that time, I had the honor of meeting Nellie Gale Moulton, Jared's great-grandmother. She was an artist, and she was just beginning to, they were starting to build the Playhouse. It was an old dry cleaning company, that the grounds that they built the building on. And Tommy and I Tommy got married, and I was his best man. Then I got married, and I was the best man. And then I started working at the Mission Hospital. The first year I was an orderly and opened up the Mission Hospital. The next year I was an orderly at San Clemente Hospital and helped open that hospital. And then I went to Saddleback College, where my speech and drama teacher was the gentleman, the theater. What's the theater over at Saddleback? McKinney. Dr. McKinney was my speech and drama teacher, and now their theater is named McKinney Theater. So then in the late 70s and 80s, I went down to Guadalajara, Mexico, and I went through a medical school, 8 years down there. medical school internship and residency, and I wanted to stay in Mexico the whole time, but my grandmother and my cousin got very sick, so I came back up to Altadena, which is gone now, but they're rebuilding it. And then I would go down to my grandparents' house, like I said, at Treasure Island again. And I started, when I came back, it was like in 1986, I think, 1987, I worked at my brother's new restaurant, the Laguna Village. And I had some friends, Paul and Reese Toft, who were working at the who were volunteers at the Laguna Playhouse. This was 1989, and Paul asked me if I wanted to be a bartender. So I said, sure, I'll be a bartender and an usher there. And that's when I met. First met Joe. He was with the youth theater. One of the first shows I worked on was There's a Boy in the Girls' Bathroom. And I believe that was Dwight Armstrong was
That's right, Dwight Armstrong.
I think he was the only boy in the class. That's why Joe did that.
No. Matter of fact, the boy in the show with him has been on Broadway 4 times.
Oh, good.
Zach.
Zach. Oh, I know Zach very well.
Yeah.
I had a huge development with the youth theater when I became house manager. Reese got me an audition with Andy for one of the plays. I believe it was The Liar, possibly. And Andy talked to me afterwards. He said, Wally, I could probably cast you in the show, but I have another actor that I have in mind. And he says, how would you like to be our house manager? Because the house manager at that time was going to quit and go to Hawaii, Mike Crawford. He was going to go to Hawaii for a job, and so this was in May, I believe. And then, so I started shadowing Michael. He was in charge of the front of the house and the bartenders, and ordering all the supplies. And so I shadowed him and learned about all the seating. I learned about the bartenders. And I learned about all the ordering of all the supplies. And that was with South Coast Distributors. And we're still using South Coast Distributors after 36 years of getting all the supplies. It was a father and 3 brothers. The father's passed away, one of the brothers has passed away, but I still know the other two brothers that work there. So then I was in charge of all the ushers as well. And there was probably 80 or 90 ushers there. And it was before we did summer shows next door at the festival, but we had a food booth there. The Presbyterian Church had a booth, the Boys Club had a booth, we had a booth, little food booths there. We had
hot dogs.
Knishes and hot dogs and lemonade, and the other ones had sandwiches or different kind of snacks and everything. And so I would schedule all the ushers to do it just like a play. Okay, you could do Thursdays 1 to 3. There was 2 shifts, I believe, we had there from noon up to the evening show. And then we finally started doing summer shows. Sylvia was our first show that I Love You Perfect Now Change was our first show and the run of the I Love You Perfect Now Change, we sold out every single show, and the fire department would only let me put 10 people on each side of the theater as standing room only. And every single, when we did it on the main stage, this is before summer, that's one of the reasons why we reprised it in the festival. And
actually, Wally, you got that backwards. It was summer first and then in the season.
No.
Wasn't it?
No. That's
all I know is that's the only show that beat Oliver and Secret Garden.
Yeah, and then Sylvia beat that.
Oh, sorry, I got it back.
Right.
Don't Dress for Dinner.
Yeah, Don't Dress for Dinner was one of our first shows. And then, so then my ushers grew and grew and grew during the years. I became the company manager when we went Lord, so we had to get apartments for all the actors. We got 12 apartments in Club Laguna, who was run by Shea Properties, and I think one of the board members got us a deal for all of those apartments there, and eventually we got...
It was a Playhouse parent, actually. It was a Playhouse
Oh,
parent.
Playhouse parent, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I had known all, I knew, I helped Joe, not auditioning, but getting all the kids for all the performances. And like Joe said, we had a child in the box office, we had a child in the sound booth, we had a child as a house manager, we had a child as, the kids did all the ushering, and all the kids that weren't in the show were the ones that did this. And that happened year after year after year. The Playhouse parents, I knew all the parents, I knew every one of the kids. I'd go to the rehearsals. I had done a voiceover for a main stage Boise Club. I was Floyd, some kind of Floyd farmer or something. And when Donna joined with Joe in the youth theater, she found out that I spoke German, so there was four plays that we did about the Holocaust, and each one of the scripts had just German loudspeaker voices coming over. So Donna and I wrote in all kinds of lines that the loudspeaker did. So I was in 4 of those shows where I played a Nazi. And I got great reviews being a Nazi, and everybody says, God, it's so weird seeing you as a nasty Nazi bully, because you're not like that at all. And I said, see what a good actor I am. Anyway, and I also did Blind Pew and Treasure Island. One of the Holocaust shows, Tom and Carolyn Bent had they sponsored it or produced it, Hannah's Suitcase. I was in that show as well. I've been on stage 6 times at the Playhouse through the years. When I became the company manager and got those 12 apartments, I had to furnish all those 12 apartments according to equity rules. That we had to have lights and beds and mattresses and couches and TVs and all that kind of stuff. So I had to house all of them. And his last one was in our 97th season, and he was in Harvey.
Miriam Shelton's son, if anybody knows Miriam, the sculptress.
Yeah, exactly. And then let's see. So all those jobs I did simultaneously for years and years and years, and then finally after Rick Stein. Let's see. I got a little thing about Rick here. Well, I just put the good stuff. And all the apartments, so I had to do that every time every show ended. I also worked as a prop master, where I would go up to LA to prop houses and other theaters to rent things. I was given the entire set of the Quilters, and I used to rent that out to any theater that was doing the Quilters work, and so that was another part of my and these jobs weren't like 1 year doing this and 1 year doing that and 1 year doing the next one. These 6 jobs I did every single day, all of them. Another thing that I was mentioned as casting director. I was kind of a casting coordinator, because I took over for Reese Toft, who used to be Andy's assistant, and I would start setting up auditions. And then as we grew into the professional, the D. Lord thing, we had more and more submissions by actors, and then we got submissions from agents and managers then. We'd get a couple of hundred submissions for these actors, and then we would go up to, and I would schedule them for 2 days. Andy and I would go up there, we'd see 60 one day and 60 the next day, and whittle it down to callbacks, and that's when they did scenes together to see how the chemistry worked, and then we would hire whoever Andy wanted, or make offers to the ones that Andy offered. There was one gentleman, Tom Shelton, who in 1993 we offered him the role in Bedroom Farce, I believe it was, and then he's been on our stage more than any other actor, 15 shows. And his last one was in our 97th season, and he was in Harvey.
Miriam Shelton's son, if anybody knows Miriam, the sculptress.
Yeah, exactly. And then let's see. So all of those jobs I did simultaneously for years and years and years, and then finally. After Rick Stein, let's see, I got a little thing about Rick here. I'll just put the good stuff. Not that there was any bad stuff. So he was our executive director from 1990 to 2007, and that's when we grew from Community to the worldwide recognition of He produced over more than 100 plays, including the two national tours that Andy mentioned, Tony Award-winning show Copenhagen and Julie Harris in the Belle of Amherst, to over 40 cities across the United States. Belle of Amherst was directed by Charles Nelson Riley, who you may remember as a comedian, and who later directed Harvey, I believe, right? And it was funny. I did all the props for Harvey, and he told me that I had to have a mouse trap somewhere on stage. He said, "Doesn't matter where it is, but every show has to have a mouse trap somewhere." And I asked him, "Now should I load it?" And he said, "Well, you don't have to load it. No, just have it somewhere on the stage." I had the privilege of going to his home and seeing all his memorabilia. He was a tremendous opera director. He loved the opera, and he directed many operas. And then he also did the show Life of Riley, I believe, for the Playhouse as well. So I did. Those are two of the shows that I remember things happening about the props. I loved working with the youth theater every time. I got to know all the parents of all the kids, all the actors. They would schedule auditions with me, or schedule performances, and some of them I had to pick up at school, or wait for them to come and pick up the kids at school. And let's see. So after Rick Stein, Karen Wood came along during the 2007 recession, and she's the one that got us out of the red into the black. She was only there, I think, 5 years, maybe. 2008 to 2016. And she was not she was more of a financial guy or a budget gal. And a lot of the staff at the time, or people, they didn't realize how much she was involved in that as opposed to the theater. Many times she would come to the theater and say, "Oh, what show's on tonight?" Things like that. So they didn't really believe she was didn't know what she was doing. So I'd like to say that she really did help us get through that recession. I have worked with every single marketing director, every single development director, every guy on the crew. I got to know every single one in every department because that's just what I wanted to do, and I would say hello to every single person there from the box office up, and that would happen every single day, every single night. I started working with Rick as hourly, but it turned out that I would work 14 or 16 hours a day. So there was something about that being exempt or non-exempt. I never really know which is which. But to be the good one on salary, you had to have somebody under. You had to be a supervisor from someone else. And I wasn't a supervisor. But he says, "Wally, you supervise all the ushers." So he made me exempt. Thank God, because I've been on salary ever since then. And I still work 14 or 16 hours a day or longer. And it would be every single day. We used to have just Mondays off, I believe. And then eventually I got to Monday and Tuesday off. That went on until all the way up until COVID. I had 184 ushers. And I knew every single one of them's name, every single one of their husbands or wives' names. There was a lot of couples that were both come as ushers. Roger and Ellen, I remember when they came with the Sally Struthers show. I have an interesting story about Sally, always Patsy Cline. We had a young gal, Barbara Stewart, who was a blonde, blue-eyed young gal, and she played Patsy Cline. With brown contacts and a wig and the period clothing, and did all the singing in the show. And after every show, Sally would go down to the green room and see visitors. And every single show, Barbara would take off her wig, take out her contacts, put her casual clothes on, and she'd walk through the green room, and no one even knew that she was Patsy Cline. And I asked her, I said, "Well, why don't you share that?" But she said, "No, I don't want to. Let Sally take care of all of that." I've seen over 400 productions. And each production had 7 or 8 weeks of show rehearsals and shows. So I was involved in all of that as well. I just loved the Laguna Playhouse, and as COVID hit it, it was going to be our 100th year anniversary, and I was thinking about retiring. So that was March 13th, 2019, and I went up. I had bought a house a year before up at Lake Arrowhead, where I was going to enjoy my retirement. And then after 20 months off, I got a call from Denise, who is our managing director now, I believe. And she said, "Wally, there's a new position in the entertainment world, COVID compliance officer. How would you like to come back and be a COVID compliance officer?" And I was thinking about it, and she said, "We'll give you the same salary." So I said, "I'm there." So in October, when we did a non-equity season in October with I Love You Not Perfect Not Change, and we did, and the Lithgow production company who started our panto, our years and years of all these panto shows, which have been the most incredible shows ever, at least patron-wise, and they went off of equity to do a production for us that year. And then the next year they went back into equity. And then also we went back into equity. We had been, like Andy said, we had started off with Lord D, then we went up to Lord C, and then we went up to Lord B also. After Karen Wood stopped as our artistic director, executive director, then it changed to managing director. I think when David came around. But I wanted to start off by saying, talking about Aruni Gay Peak and Isabel Frost and 17 others on October 22nd, 1920. They formed the Laguna Beach Community Dramatic Club. They wrote plays in their homes and did discussions among themselves, and finally decided that they should open up a playhouse down in Laguna Beach, which was built down on Ocean Boulevard. In 1922, they started building it, and then in 1924, it opened up for the whole town. I know that Glenna started talking about the 30s, 40s, and the 50s. That's when, let's see, Howard Hap Graham served as our managing director and producer twice, from 59 to 64 and 71 to 75.
He went by Hap.
Graham.
Yeah, that's what Howard Hap Graham. Yeah. And he himself was an actor in 1945 on Broadway with his friend Betty Davis. And Betty Davis, his sister, worked backstage, Barbara Berry, and so Betty Davis and her husband Gary Merrill, they did a one night show in June 1960, and it raised $10,000, and then that show went on to a 41-week tour over the city. Over the nation, rather, in 40 different cities. Hap was also, worked also as the Festival of Arts and Pageant of Masters. He was the first one to stage the Last Supper. I wanted to mention the people that were involved getting us from community to the where we are today, Marthella Randall, Jackie Moffitt, Jim Ryan, Otis Healy, George Woods, Connie Morthlin, and Jody Billings. I also wanted to mention the board members that I've worked with, several board members, Otis Healy, Heidi Miller, Marthella Randall, Ilona Martin, Pat Kollenda, Lisa Hale, Karen Phillip. Oh, you need to move on. Okay.
Well, I think we want to have some time for Q&A.
All right, and that's it for me.
Okay.
I'm still working there, COVID compliance officer.
Thank you.
I live in Lake Arrowhead. I commute 800 miles a week, and I've been that for the last 8 years.
Anybody with questions for the panelists? Okay, you need to. No, please. This is a professional.
There was a gentleman who did set direction. I want to say his name was Dwight. He always came to opening night with his mom.
Richard Odell.
Richard.
Yeah.
There's like a special story about him. I know. He was there for how many years?
Many.
Sign as well as senior citizen.
Yeah.
He was there from 93 to 2012. And he worked on 8 world premieres and 12 American premieres, designing over 150 productions.
And he did the costumes for South Coast Christmas Carol every year.
Right.
But he actually though started working with me in 1988. He just was on staff at that
Remember
point.
for Patriots Day Parade, we needed a costume for Pat Kollenda, and he was the guy we called. It was the Statue of Liberty.
Oh, that's right, I was
Yeah.
a statue.
Any other questions?
Eric, I'd like to say something.
Let me give you the mic.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to say, since I started off saying how wonderful the community theater, I really was struck by what Andy said, that, you know, I idealize that memory, but there's all kinds of studies. There's a guy named Robert Putnam who's written about bowling alone, that very many vital community institutions, not just theater, are having a hard time sustaining themselves. People have different patterns of life. And I just wanted to throw in that little bit of context for the history that we heard unfolding. Thank you.
Yeah. Back in the 50s and even 60s, the idea that there were mischievous housewives who could be in a play down at the Laguna Playhouse and some people that weren't working or whatever, it just wasn't the case any longer. It wasn't the case. Those people disappeared. They're all working 3 jobs. But I have an anecdote I'd like to tell you, a funny story. We all save these in the theater. We were doing a production of a Stephen Sondheim review, and one of the numbers in it was from Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, called Everybody Always, what is it? Everybody ought to have a maid. You probably know it. Everybody ought to have a maid. Everybody ought to have a working girl, a lurking girl. You've heard that song. Well, the girl that was playing the maid in that number, a beautiful, young, very extremely gifted actress, had just gotten married about a week before we opened. And I went on to she played the maid in that number, a little duster and a little outfit, sexy little outfit. And I went to the theater for the opening night. I went backstage to see how people were doing. And they're all scrambling around in an emergency, in a crisis. So what's going on? And the stage manager's got this thing, and she's trying to make a apron and trying to fold some paper under a little maid's hat. And I said, what happened? And she goes, Tammy took her costume home last night and forgot it.
You're a bad boy.
That is a true story. They had a completely fabricated maid's costume for her. She was very embarrassed, I have to say.
Do you have any other questions? Hearing none. Thank you.
All right.
When I worked with you,